She laughed when she saw what I was holding. Not a phone. Not flowers. Not even divorce papers. No, I was holding the smoke detector. It had gone off at 2:17 a.m., blaring like a fire alarm should. But there was no smoke, no fire, just that blinding red light and the beeping that felt like it was coming from inside my skull. I had climbed onto the kitchen counter to rip it out of the ceiling. When I did, I found the battery had been stuffed in backward, not just loose but deliberately jammed in wrong, like someone wanted it to not work. She stood in the hallway in her robe, smirking. "Must be your paranoia again," she said, sipping from a glass of red wine. At 2:20 a.m., that's when I knew something was going on. You don't tamper with the smoke alarm unless you don't want someone to hear something. Not a fire, but maybe a door opening. A click. A voice. I didn't accuse her right away. I didn't have to. I just started watching. For 6 nights, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with one AirPod in and a decoy playlist on repeat, pretending to doze off while my phone recorded everything. I synced it to my old iPad upstairs so I could scrub through the audio the next day. On night 4, I heard it, at exactly 3:09 a.m. The soft creak of the back door. Then a man's voice. Not a full sentence. Just one word, muffled, but unmistakable. Quick. That was it. That was all I needed. The next morning, I cleaned the kitchen like I always did. Left her coffee just the way she liked it. Oat milk, cinnamon dusted. Then I drove to my brother's place 2 hours away and gave him a backup copy of the audio. If something happens to me, I told him, don't call the police first. Just play this. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. But I hadn't. I was finally seeing things clearly. And I was done pretending. I didn't say anything the next morning. I just handed her the coffee, kissed her on the cheek, and sat across from her at the table. She scrolled through her phone like nothing had happened. Like the word quick hadn't echoed in my ears all night. Like I didn't spend 5 hours scrubbing background noise to isolate one voice I'd never heard before. A voice coming from inside my house. She was humming, relaxed, like someone who believed they were still in control. I watched her sip her coffee. My hands were steady. She glanced up at me and smiled. "Why are you so quiet lately?" I answered without blinking. "Because I already know what you're going to say before you say it." She froze for a second, almost imperceptibly, but then laughed it off like she always did when something landed too close to the truth. "God, you've been acting so weird lately," she said. "Maybe you need to take a break from your little true crime podcasts." I let her have that line. I didn't respond, but inside, my mind was racing. Not with fear, not with anger, but with preparation. Because that morning, I finally stopped guessing and started confirming. The audio from the AirPod wasn't perfect, but it told me more than I expected. The guy never stayed long, no more than 15 minutes. Never flushed the toilet. Never said her name. Every time he entered through the back door, which meant she wanted him to avoid the front. She was managing him like a controlled variable. A secret experiment she thought she had mastered. She hadn't counted on me noticing the forks, or the jazz music, or the backward battery. I went back to the iPad and started keeping notes, timestamps, weather conditions, anything I could cross-reference. I logged when she showered, when she changed the sheets, even how she folded laundry. And what I found wasn't just betrayal. It was scheduling. This wasn't random. It was routine. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday between 2:55 and 3:20 a.m. He came. She cleared the way, and he vanished. But the final confirmation came in the form of a smell. On the 7th night, I walked into the kitchen a few minutes after she did. She had left the back door slightly ajar. Just a crack. But enough. I stepped outside barefoot. The backyard was still. Cold. The motion light flicked on. And that's when I smelled it. Not cologne. Not sweat. Not detergent. Gasoline. I followed it, faint but there, to the far edge of the yard where we kept the garden tools. And there, behind the shed, was something that didn't belong. A motorcycle helmet. Black, scuffed, and buried behind a bag of mulch I didn't buy. I didn't touch it. just stared at it for a long time. Then I walked back inside. She was already back in bed, pretending to sleep. I lay down beside her and stared at the ceiling. The forks were just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I lay next to her, listening to her breathing shift between stages. Shallow, deep, the little unconscious murmur she made when her dreams started. I used to think it was sweet. Now it just sounded like static. My mind was racing through every possible motive, every outcome, every next step. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted understanding. But I couldn't ask her. I couldn't confront her, because I wasn't even sure this was just about cheating anymore. That helmet behind the shed wasn't old. The visor still had a factory sticker. Whoever owned it had been here recently, possibly the night before. But we live in a quiet neighborhood. No bikes roaring by. No tire tracks on our driveway. Which means whoever was coming in was cutting the engine and walking the rest of the way. At 4:10 a.m., I got out of bed and went back to the iPad. I synced up the recording from the previous night. My notes showed a door creak at 3:06 a.m. But this time, when I enhanced the audio, I heard something I hadn't caught before. A second voice. Not deep, not loud. Almost like a whisper, but definitely there. Two men, talking just outside the house. That changed everything. I replayed the clip over and over, slowing it down, scrubbing the hiss and static, filtering for low-frequency tones. It was faint, but the second voice said one clear phrase. Is she sure? No response. Then footsteps. Then silence. I sat back in my chair, and for the first time in this whole unraveling mess, I actually felt fear. Not jealousy. Not betrayal. Fear. Because now this wasn't about some affair. This was about a plan. And I wasn't in it. That day, I went about everything like normal. I packed her lunch. I fixed the garage door she kept forgetting to mention was jammed. I told her she looked amazing in her cardigan, the one she wore on her client calls. And she smiled at me with that same look she gave strangers at the grocery store. Polite, polished, empty. I left for work like always. But I didn't go far. Instead, I parked 2 streets down and walked back, cutting behind our neighbor's fence, keeping low beneath the hedge line. At 9:12 a.m., she left, alone, purse over shoulder, big sunglasses, no phone in her hand. I watched her walk 3 blocks to the corner cafe, the one with no cameras. Then she vanished. She wasn't going to work. She hadn't been for weeks. That's when I made the decision. No more recordings. No more notes. I was going to follow her. Not to confront her, but to finally see the full picture. Because something was happening just beneath the surface of my life, and I was done pretending it was small. I was done pretending it was just an affair. The hardest part wasn't following her. It was staying calm while doing it. I had to suppress everything. The pounding in my chest, the questions echoing in my head, the urge to just walk up to her and say, "Who is he?" But I didn't. I waited. I stayed half a block behind, using the reflection of parked cars to track her. She walked like she wasn't in a hurry, but every so often she looked over her shoulder. Not casually, deliberately, like someone who had done this before. She passed the cafe and didn't stop. Then she turned onto 8th Street, a stretch of rundown offices and locked-up storefronts. There was a gray building halfway down. No sign on the door, just a keypad and a dead security camera hanging by its wire. She punched in a code. The door clicked. She slipped inside. I didn't follow. Not yet. I circled the block twice, scanned the area, noted every exit. I didn't know what that place was. It didn't match any business in the area, and it wasn't listed online. When I finally walked past it, I noticed something chilling. The keypad still had a faint smear across the 3, 1, and 9 keys, probably the last digits she'd pressed. I walked by without stopping, didn't look back. I needed time. I needed answers without tipping my hand. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to work. Then I went home and pulled out the backup phone I kept in a locked drawer in the garage. It was a cheap burner, used once during a snowstorm when we lost power and the main lines went out. She didn't know it existed. That was going to be my new line of surveillance. I charged it, wiped it clean, and installed a hidden camera app. That night, I placed it inside the living room wall vent, facing the hallway. Motion activated, silent, invisible, and what it recorded just 2 days later made everything I thought I knew completely collapse. It wasn't just him visiting when I was asleep. There was someone else. Someone younger, smaller, a woman. She entered at 2:41 a.m., stayed exactly 13 minutes, and left through the side door, never looking up at the camera once. She wore gloves. She didn't speak. And my wife handed her something before she left. Something wrapped in silver foil. That was the moment my chest went ice cold. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity. Something was being exchanged. And I had no idea what or why. I waited 3 more days before I followed her inside. I needed the timing to be perfect, not rushed, not suspicious. I wore a delivery vest I'd bought online, carried an empty pizza box, and walked like I belonged. At 9:07 a.m., she entered the gray building again, and 15 minutes later, so did I. The keypad was cracked but still functioning. I tapped in the code I'd guessed, 319, and the door opened with a soft buzz. What I stepped into wasn't an office. It wasn't anything. It was a black-walled corridor lined with soundproofing foam, the kind used in recording studios or underground clubs. The lights were dim, pulsing slightly, as if reacting to movement. I kept walking. No signs, no people, just a distant hum, mechanical, cold. At the end of the hallway, I found a door that had no handle, only a fingerprint scanner. But someone had propped it open with a roll of tape. Inside, I saw her, Leanne, standing beneath a harsh spotlight, holding a clipboard, speaking to a group of people wearing earpieces and blank ID tags. It looked like some kind of set, but not for film or TV. It was smaller, cheaper, more paranoid. And behind her, stacked in neat rows, were coolers. Real ones, industrial, sealed, all marked with dates and symbols I didn't understand. I ducked behind a stack of plastic bins and tried to film with the burner phone, but the signal died. No service. I had no choice but to just watch. She didn't look like a woman having an affair. She looked like someone running operations. There was no warmth in her face. She wasn't pretending to be happy. She was working, efficient, cold. She handed off the silver-wrapped object to a tall woman in a trench coat, then signed something on the clipboard. One of the men laughed and said, "You always deliver early," and she replied, "I'll never forget it." That's what they're paying for. I don't know how long I was in there, 10 minutes? 30? But at some point, someone closed the door behind me, quietly, on purpose. When I turned to leave, the hallway was empty. No voices, no light, no sound, just my reflection in the dusty glass, holding an empty pizza box and a phone with no signal, realizing I was in a place that didn't want to be found. When I finally got out of that building, the sun hit my face like a spotlight. It felt too bright, too open, like the world outside was suddenly fake compared to whatever I just stepped through. I walked fast, cutting through alleys, past dumpsters, trying to get back to my car without being noticed. But I knew I hadn't left alone. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a shadow. It was just a feeling, like static in the back of my skull, or eyes you can't see pressing into your shoulder blades. I didn't look back until I was 4 blocks away, crossing under a flickering streetlight, and that's when I saw him. Same build as one of the clipboard guys. Gray hoodie, jeans, no expression. He wasn't walking fast, just steady. Same pace as me, not too close, not too far. I turned right. So did he. I crossed to the other side of the street. He did too. I ducked into a bookstore and watched through the window as he waited across the road, pretending to check his phone. I stayed there 20 minutes, pretending to browse used paperbacks, heart pounding, pretending I hadn't just seen something no one was supposed to see. When I left through the back alley, I took the long way home, 3 rideshares, 2 different buses, cut through a shopping mall to lose the trail. By the time I walked through my front door, the house felt colder than usual. Not in temperature, in presence. Like I'd brought something in with me that didn't belong. She was sitting on the couch, sipping tea, reading a magazine like nothing in the world had changed. She looked up and smiled. "You're home early," she said. I smiled back, sat beside her, pretended everything was fine. But inside I was spiraling. Because before I left the bookstore, I checked the burner phone's offline cache. Even though the signal had died, the app had autosaved one frame of footage. Blurry, low-res, time-stamped, but visible. And in that single frame, captured in a sliver of light from above, was a metal table. And on that table was a photo of me, paper-clipped to a folder, with the word inactive stamped across the top. The word inactive echoed in my mind like it had been tattooed on my memory. That single frame from the burner phone, the photo of me clipped to a file, on a metal table in a place I wasn't supposed to be, it rewired something in my brain. I wasn't just spying anymore. I wasn't just tracking a cheating spouse. I had stumbled into something curated, organized, and intentional. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, lights off, cycling through every moment of our marriage like it was evidence. The places she insisted we move to, the job offers she encouraged me to decline, the people she introduced me to at parties, always a little too curious about my background, my habits, my routine. And then it hit me. I hadn't gotten a single piece of physical mail in weeks. No bills, no packages. Even junk mail had stopped. I checked the mailbox the next morning, empty again. So I drove to the local post office and asked if there had been a hold request. The woman at the desk scanned her screen, paused, then leaned forward and whispered, "You're flagged as non-residential." I blinked. "What does that mean?" She shrugged, visibly uneasy. "I don't know. It's not a term we use. I talked to someone downtown. I never made it downtown, because when I got home, my driveway was blocked by a van. Unmarked, matte black, engine running, two men inside pretending to argue over directions. I parked 3 blocks away and walked in from behind the neighborhood. When I reached my house, the van was gone. But something else wasn't. My front door was open 2 inches. No sign of forced entry, just quietly ajar, like someone wanted me to know they'd been there. Inside, everything looked untouched, until I checked the bedroom. My closet door had been opened, but not like a break-in, more like a search. Precise one. All the hangers were straight, but the floorboard I kept loose. The one hiding my father's watch, the only thing I'd inherited from him, was snapped in half. The watch was gone. Not stolen. Removed. For the first time in this entire mess, I didn't feel like the investigator anymore. I felt like the test subject. And I finally understood something I hadn't even let myself ask until now. This wasn't just about Leanne. This was about me. They hadn't picked her to betray me. They had picked me to be betrayed. I didn't confront her the way I had imagined. No shouting, no dramatic speech, no cornering her with evidence. By the time I stood in our kitchen that evening, everything I thought I wanted to say had already burned out of me. She walked in holding groceries like it was just another day, humming under her breath, not a hint of guilt in her eyes. I waited until she set the bag down and said, calmly, "How long have you been working for them?" That wiped the smile off her face. She didn't ask who. She didn't act confused. She just paused. And then she said something I'll never forget. "You weren't supposed to notice, but I hoped you would." I stood there, frozen, as she reached into the bag and pulled out a small black envelope, thick, sealed, my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. "They were watching to see how you'd react," she said. "If you'd break, if you'd run. You didn't. That's why I left the closet cracked." Inside the envelope was a key, a real one, heavy, old-fashioned, like it opened a vault or a safe deposit box, along with a note, "Fairbanks, Locker 312, no cameras." She didn't explain. She didn't cry. She just walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door behind her. I never asked why she was involved. Maybe she was forced. Maybe she volunteered. But in that moment it didn't matter. Because the people who were watching me, testing me, hadn't broken me. They'd given me a door. And I was about to unlock it. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've moved. New name. New city. I keep to myself. but I've never felt more in control of my life. Whatever they were doing, whoever they were, I passed the test. And the key? Let's just say it opened more than one door.